Howdy, it's Kyle with your geography news for April 2020, where I'll be recapping the top stories from the US and around the world that has something to do with geography that occurred in the previous month. Now, obviously, the biggest news from the US and the rest of the world over the past month has been the global response to the COVID-19 outbreak, but in this video, I'm not going to be discussing anything about the coronavirus, just other interesting things that have to do with geography that are obviously far less important than the response to a pandemic. I'm going to start off with discussing some of the major earthquakes that happened over the past month. The most prominent of the earthquakes of the previous month was a 5.7 that struck just outside of Salt Lake City on March 18th. This was the largest earthquake to occur in Utah since 1992. The epicenter was about 15 miles northwest of Salt Lake City, and there were numerous aftershocks in the region, many of which that were felt. Thankfully, however, damage was only minor and there were no injuries reported. The largest earthquake of the previous month was a 5.9 quake that struck just off the northern California coast, not too far from the town of Eureka. This was a very shallow earthquake that happened just 1 mile below the surface, and a very shallow earthquake like that can be felt from very far away, and this quake was felt over 200 miles away. Shallow earthquakes are the norm for the earthquakes that occur in the eastern US, and they can be felt from pretty far away. So when there's an earthquake in, say, New York or Virginia, it can be felt hundreds of miles away, many states away. In the West, the earthquakes tend to be much deeper, and they're usually not felt more than 100 miles away. Earlier in March, a 5.8 earthquake struck the town of Adak, Alaska. Adak is the westernmost town in the entire US. It sits at the western end of the Aleutian Islands. It's a chain of a bunch of extremely active volcanoes. There's all kinds of earthquake and seismic activity there, so a 5.8 is certainly nothing new to Adak, but that is still a pretty good sized earthquake. And on March 26th, a 5.0 earthquake struck in western Texas. It occurred kind of out in the middle of nowhere in the Permian Basin oil drilling fields. And just like all of the earthquakes that have occurred in Oklahoma over the past decade, this one was also a man-made quake. These kinds of earthquakes occur when water is injected back into the ground after the fossil fuels have been extracted. But like most of the other fracking earthquakes you'll get in Oklahoma, this one was a pretty shallow quake and didn't do really any damage. Now I want to discuss a couple of interesting stories about volcanoes in Hawaii. The Nahuku lava tube reopened to visitors at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, which is located on the Big Island. Following the 2018 big earthquake and eruptions of Mount Kilauea on the island, there was a lot of damage to the lava tube, and it's something that people would go walking through and became pretty dangerous. For the past year or so, they've been stabilizing the tube, and now it's once again safe for visitors to go through. And hiking through a lava tube is really cool. You're literally just walking through the channel that the lava passes through during a volcanic eruption. Another interesting story from the Big Island, a man hiking on the Mauna Loa volcano found 2 undetonated bombs. The U.S. Army dropped 20 bombs in this area in 1935 and all but 2 detonated. There could have been serious damage from the eruption into the town of Hilo, so what the Army was doing was trying to blow up some of the rock to divert some of the lava flow away from the town. But it's got to be kind of unnerving to be hiking around in a remote area and all of a sudden just seeing 2 bombs that didn't go off. How they went this long without being discovered, I don't know, but the Army has since taken them and disposed of them properly. The official visitation numbers for national parks in 2019 have come in, and no surprise, Great Smoky Mountains National Park is still number 1 with over 12.5 million visitors annually. And it's not just that Great Smoky Mountains has the most visitors, it has by far the most visitors. Second is the Grand Canyon with 6 million, so Great Smoky Mountains has more than twice the number of visitors than the Grand Canyon. The next 4 are Rocky Mountain, Zion, Yosemite, and Yellowstone that each have over 4 million visitors annually. And then 7 through 10 are Acadia, Grand Teton, Olympic, and Glacier, which all have over 3 million. I'm not exactly sure why Great Smoky Mountains is so much more popular than all the other parks, but it probably has something to do with the fact that there are over 10 million people that live within 4 hours of the park. It's also a park that does not have an entrance fee, and a lot of the visitors only come for a day or a very short period of time. A lot of folks literally just drive through the park during October to see the fall foliage, but don't even actually get out of the car. But still, to have twice the number of visitors as the Grand Canyon, that's pretty crazy. And now for a couple of stories about human geography in the US. So as you probably know, the Census 2020 is going on right now. We're starting to get some early returns on some data. In North Carolina, Wake County, which is home to the capital Raleigh, passed Mecklenburg County, which is home to Charlotte, to become North Carolina's most populous county. Both counties have about 1.1 million people, but Wake has about 1,000 more than Mecklenburg now. However, the greater Charlotte metropolitan area, which spills into South Carolina, is still larger than the overall Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill metro area. In other census news, the city of Baltimore is going to be under 600,000 people for the first time in over 100 years. The city has been losing population for 70 years. In 1950, it was the sixth largest city in the US. Now it is number 30. There has been population decline due to a lot of the blue-collar type jobs going away, kind of like you see in the Rust Belt in the Midwest. The combination of blue-collar jobs leaving the city, along with white-collar jobs opening up en masse in D.C. just down the road, has led to a big population decline in Baltimore. In international census news, Ukraine, which has faced many serious problems over the past several years, has continued to see its population to decline. The 2020 census estimates are coming in at about 40 million people, which is significantly lower than where it was 10 years ago. At the 2001 census, Ukraine had approximately 50 million people, so just this century alone, Ukraine has lost approximately 20% of its population. There are estimates that there are 100,000 people leaving Ukraine each month. A lot of this has to do with worries and threats of Russia with the Crimean Peninsula, but Ukraine is also the poorest country in Europe, so people are leaving to get better economic opportunities in other parts of the continent. In environmental conservation news, Afghanistan has a new national park. It's called the Bamiyan Plateau Protected Area, and it's about the size of Rhode Island. Since coming out of civil war, Afghanistan's been engaging in a lot of environmental conservation. The first national park that they opened about 10 years ago now gets 200,000 tourist visits a year. The protected area is home to two very endangered species, the Persian leopard and ibex. And it might seem crazy being that Afghanistan was at major civil war so recently, but tourism is up in the country. There are many beautiful areas in the country, so they're focusing on ecotourism to be a big player in the future. In other world nature news, there's a new champion for the animal that lives at the highest elevation on Earth. The yellow-rumped, leaf-eared mouse has been found living at 22,000 feet. They've been seen living on the world's highest active volcano, which is in the Andes on the Argentina-Chile border. And this is fascinating for two reasons. One, the vegetation line is 20,000 feet, so at 22,000 feet where these mice have been seen to live, there's no vegetation. And also, they're known to be at lower elevations all the way down to sea level, so this is the animal that has the highest elevation range in the entire world. But even though you're at 22,000 feet elevation, this is a desert, so there's very little precipitation there, and this is one of the driest areas in the world. So these mice live at 22,000 feet where there's hardly any oxygen, hardly any precipitation, and no vegetation at all, so they live in one of the harshest environments on the entire planet. So those are some of the things I wanted to discuss about geography that occurred in the previous month, and of course none of these are anywhere near as important as a response to a global pandemic, but I think right now people might be interested in hearing a little bit of different news for a change. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know you approve, and consider subscribing to this channel if you're interested in stuff about geography, U.S. travel, road tripping across the U.S., just nerdy stuff about geography. But yeah, thanks for watching. Geography King, signing out.